It's time to talk business. Please welcome your host, Chris Peterson with MedianReport.
You wake up every morning and you realize that the world you lived in yesterday does not exist anymore. Now there are a new set of rules, a new world order. Basically, this can be said at least about a period since we last time met. Today we will discuss Venezuela and we will look into 2026 from different perspectives, both globally and from the Baltic angle. My name is Chris Peterson. Welcome to MedianReport. We will talk. At the end of the year, Estonia's economy presents a mixed picture of easing pressures alongside persistent everyday cost challenges. Consumer prices were 4.1% higher than a year earlier in December, showing that inflation remains clearly above comfort levels, even though monthly prices edged slightly lower, hinting at some stabilization. For households, the most tangible pressure continues to come from food prices. Meat and dairy products became even more expensive, reinforcing the sense that basic necessities are still driving living cost anxiety despite calmer headline inflation. At the same time, global developments are moving in more favorable direction. A large share of raw material prices on world markets has fallen markedly over the past year, including energy inputs and several agriculture commodities, creating a potential buffer against further price surges in the months ahead. Energy dynamics have also offered some relief. Lower electricity prices in December eased the burden on consumers, and Estonia's strong integration with the Nordic power market played an important role, as nearly half of the electricity consumed in the country last year was imported from Finland, where prices are typically lower. Together, these trends painted a nuanced picture of Estonia entering the new year with inflation that is no longer accelerating but still unevenly felt, where the global price declines and cheaper electricity offer a hope, while food costs continue to test household budgets and confidence. So let's see what Leno Uskula from Luminor has to say about 2026.
We do expect 26 to be better in that respect because government is putting more money in. We have 700 euros tax exemption for everybody, which adds 90 euros or more for half of the employees in the country. That is 1% of GDP, almost in expenditures, more in consumption, right? So that most likely will make people happy. And with inflation falling, we had quite high inflation this year because of tax changes. It's going to be some inflation still next year, but around 3% probably. With wages going up by 5%, getting the extra net tax benefit next year, we're ready for consumption growth, which is more a broad-based growth.
Latvia enters 26 with a cautiously improving economic outlook shaped by gradual recovery rather than rapid acceleration. After a period of weak growth, the economy is expected to regain momentum as domestic demand strengthens, supported by rising wages, easing inflation pressures, and more stable external environment. Household purchasing power is projected to improve as price growth moderates compared with the peaks of recent years, allowing consumption to play a stronger role in driving activity. Investment should also recover, helped by better financing conditions, EU funds, and infrastructure spending, while exports are expected to benefit from steadier demand in key European markets. At the same time, the outlook remains uneven. Inflation in Latvia is likely to stay higher than the euro area average, particularly due to services and food prices, keeping cost pressure visible for households and businesses. Structural challenges persist as well, including relatively low productivity growth, demographic pressures, and sizable public sector footprint, all of which weigh on long-term competitiveness. Fiscal policy will remain a balancing act as higher spending needs coexist with the necessity to keep public finances under control. Overall, Latvia approaches 26 with growth returning but still fragile, where improved confidence and external stability offer opportunities, while deeper reforms and investment in higher value-added activities remain crucial for more durable and resilient economic progress.
We're expecting that inflation next year will be somewhat slower, around also, like Leno said, in Estonia, around 3%, for us as well, something around 3%. And this inflation that we're seeing next year will be, this lower inflation will be helped by global energy prices that are fairly low at the moment. We're seeing global food prices that are on their way down, except for coffee. Coffee is still extremely expensive, but you can't wish for it all. We are seeing also in Latvia that next year, thanks to elections and as an election promise, is this decrease in part of the food products, the VAT decrease for part of the food products. So that will also help to bring inflation somewhat down. So inflation story for next year should be a bit milder than it was this year.
As Lithuania enters 26, the economy is navigating a mix of reforms, corporate adjustments, and strategic energy decisions that reflect both domestic pressures and geopolitical considerations. A major pension reform allowing residents more flexibly to withdraw or manage second pillar contributions has triggered tens of thousands of inquiries, potentially boosting short-term liquidity and reshaping household financial behavior. At the same time, companies like Telia Lithuania are streamlining operations and reducing staff, highlighting ongoing adjustments in the business sector amid evolving market conditions. On the energy front, Lithuania signed a new gas transit agreement with Russia's Gazprom, securing higher transit revenues compared with previous contracts, but raising concerns about national security and a reliance on Russian-linked infrastructure. Together, these developments show a country balancing economic modernization, labor market pressures, and energy strategy where reforms and corporate restructuring may strengthen domestic activity, while energy and geopolitical risks remain closely watched.
I think that the main threat, of course, for our economy for the next year is what will happen in global economy and manufacturing. I think our manufacturing is at the biggest risk, and if we don't have above 3% growth in real GDP for the next year, so it means that we have a more serious problem with manufacturing than we projected.
It's now more than clear that drug trafficking was just a smokescreen for Trump to steal Venezuela's rich crude oil reserves. Yes, it's stealing, at least according to definitions from the old world we lived in before the second Trump term. A lot of people, including me, still can't wake up from the shock we experienced when Delta Force in Caracas captured the president of Venezuela and brought him to court in New York City. But some people, especially those who have followed this topic for more than just a few weeks, have their own theories and hypotheses. One of them is Pert Lomp, a business consultant and mentor from Estonia, currently settled in Sicily. He wrote an article about ongoing events in LinkedIn, which caught my attention. That's also the reason why I invited Pert to MedianReport to discuss it with him directly. For those interested, I believe also the link to the article down here in the notes.
I don't know. I moved a year ago to Sicily, and this kind of things happen when you will have a bit more time to yourself. You will have, your somehow mind is opening up. You start noticing things a bit differently. You start to connect the dots, and once you will understand the things going on in the world. You want to put those things together and sometimes to paper that other people's, like-minded peoples, could, find, like you, Chris, the information and find it valuable, which actually can make some difference maybe for your life in future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I told you that the things that you wrote about these petrodollars and then these current events now in Venezuela and the US, I 100% agree what you wrote, and I actually to all the listeners, I suggest to go and read the article. I will put the link in the notes, but maybe in a few words, if you can describe the idea of reconstructing the Western economy using this as maybe one of the starting milestones.
Yeah, I think we all have been hearing from the news a lot of information. There are like two sides. One side is like really supporting what American current office is doing, president is doing. Other ones somehow, they are not pro-Trump, to say, and I don't necessarily say that we should have, different sides, because once you start digging in and you start to think how, and why such decisions are made, then you start to understand that sometimes you need to act fast. You need to act regardless of if there are some agreements in place, which are, I would say from the old world beliefs. So, and as we know, at the moment, the world is very hectic. I mean, lots of things are going on. And we see it also in our European Union, Brussels, that a lot of the decisions take so much time. And if we could be much faster, things could be maybe already handled, solved, and so on, so on. So that's why I'm saying that the things which maybe are done from the US part, they are not bad, but they are actually strengthening the future of Western culture, Western society, Western politics. And this is something what we will maybe understand after some time.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting thought, but then again, some critics could say that this can open up very dangerous paths for China and Russia, because they will understand very soon. Probably they have understood it for some time, but that the United States is going to take a leader role again in this Western culture and Western economy. And they start to build a very strong alliances. What we see with this already, BRICS and so on. But this is just a reason to strengthen their own alliances. For example, in this oil industry.
Yeah, if you look the oil industry, I think the act what is made at the moment by US, let's say within the last week, we all have heard. I think it has been very strategic a thing, because nowadays it's not anymore the case who actually owns the land where is the oil located. So we already know that OPEC plus Russia is basically controlling around 50% of the oil, and they are really, trying to find the ways how to get the upper hand in the world of this kind of economics. So this was very practical step from Trump administration side, basically to get control over the intersection of the economy in Venezuela. Why I'm saying it's the intersection is that it's like the leverage point. It's the intersection of energy, and there are sanctions enforcements, and if you look at China, is also really heavily trying to find ways how to get the upper hand there as well. And with that move, basically, United States gained the control of how much and what would be the price of the barrel or the petrol prices. And this actually will help a lot in future America, and I would say Western countries as well, because it has so much background. I mean, we know the war in Ukraine. We know the Russian way how they finance the war. It's the oil. It's the oil money, and now most probably I would say U.S. is controlling the price anyway. They are controlling the rails, the insurance. They are controlling the shipping. And with that, they can basically start to choke Russia, keep down the prices of the petrodollar. So Russia needs to make a decision soon. It's not like they are fixing the war and the case from tomorrow, but it's I would say it's some sort of timeline weapon which is at the moment used, and it will favor most definitely USA, and it will most definitely also benefit the Western and Baltic countries, and because Russia needs to make a decision quite soon which way to go. So will they somehow invest into the war, or will there be economical issues, or will there be social issues? They need to make a decision, and they cannot do it. They cannot carry on doing the three fronts in their country, and this will benefit us definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I was maybe more worried about building alliances like Iran, China, Russia, you name it. So basically, if Trump is, of course, now taking out Venezuela out of the game, but that is, I think that would also put a lot of pressure on these on this other side, so that they are thinking very, very quickly now how to respond, and in that case, it's a bit of a not a stable world in that sense. This year, maybe next year, maybe following 5 years, that could be true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a positive guy. I'm always trying to find some kind of positive nuances in different stories, and I'm a big believer that that today the things what happen in a story, maybe on the other side of the stage, what we don't see is actually things where we see that China is trying to find the way how to get power with the earth minerals, silver, all these kind of things, and they want to get leverage over the Americas and Western country. But still today the BRICS countries, they are also moving into digital era. They have built up. I mentioned it in newer article as well. It's called unit. It's like the digital money what they are creating. But it's very hard for them to build something and turn the ship around, because all the economical rails, everything what is important in the oil world is still under the dollar, and it will be digitalized dollar in near future. So I don't see today that there will be a very big changes in this area. Definitely, they will be pushing, trying to find a way, but it still comes to habits, common sense, the real rails, the economical things which are present at the moment in the world, and it's not very easy to change. Looking what has happened and what actually USA administration is doing at the moment. They are playing very, very strategically, even though it seems that they are, like shooting all over the place.
Yeah, it looks
But
like
those
that in media.
bullets,
It looks
yeah,
like that. It looks crazy in media, actually.
yeah. But believe me, if you start digging it, you start to understand that one thing is what media is saying, and the second thing is that yeah, there are weapons, but the bullets are very precise, very targeted, and every bullet has a meaning, what changed something in the background in favor of USA and Western countries at the moment. So I don't want to say that I'm a very big, Trump fan. There are so many things which I don't like, but if you go and start looking what is really going on, then you will understand that it's a very, very deep and very, very interesting game.
Mm. It's interesting how it started that Trump said America first, make America great, again. And then it somehow comes to putting America back in the play for the international strongmanship and something like that. So it's kind of an interesting idea how it evolved in that. Are you worried about Mexico, Colombia, Greenland?
If you look, the Trump's last statements in the media for the Colombia president, so be aware, you could be the next one. So, it's a power games, and I'm saying that Trump at the moment is trying to make, as they are saying, make America great again. They're internally making things right. And we know also from the human psychology, if you want to change the outside world, you need to change before your inside world. And I think this is something what is really going on at the moment, as they are making those changes internally. And if the intent is good, there will be, very good external changes in the world coming up as well. So
But
this is
isn't he losing allies in that way, acting very fast, cutting things with power and everything? That can happen. NATO can actually crumble, and the U.S. European Union relationships can be damaged.
But yeah, I mean that's a really interesting, a very good questions. I have been thinking about a lot. I've been doing and digging into the NATO and EU topics as well. But I don't know. Maybe when there was a last time when President Trump was in the president's position years back, then he also was really going into NATO and already saying that, hey guys, you need to start doing things differently. It cannot be so that America is making the majority of the investments into this united force. And then basically lots of people and countries were laughing that Trump said that, come on, I will not pay anything until you make some changes. And I think there is a brutality, but without the brutality like such, you cannot make big changes. And what happened after that? NATO countries started to pay more into the NATO pot, and now with the war, basically this same tactics strategy repeated itself, meaning that Trump administration clearly stated to NATO and EU that, come on, guys, we are allies. But basically, this is my saying, but as a bigger brother, you say to your smaller brother, you need to take the things into your own hands as well. You need to start growing. You need to step up. I cannot, be and defend you always. And I think, there are things at the moment in political way where I see that it's uncomfortable for EU officials and NATO officials, because they now really need to start doing their job they meant to do. And actually, America as politic is pushing them to do that. And if we look at today's media, we look at different information and what they are actually doing today, it's obvious that the ball has started to roll.
To roll, yeah.
And absolutely. And we see, smaller countries are investing. Estonia has doing it. Latvia, Lithuania is doing it. Poland is doing also, let's say, the other countries which were against it now see that they must do. Otherwise, if something happens in the EU, there might be consequences. So I think all in all, it doesn't weaken the relationships. It might weaken the relationships in the beginning until EU officials and country leaders will start to understand what is really actually behind that. But it's actually strengthening the relationships. It reduces the dependencies. So this is my take from what is really going on at the moment.
It's a very interesting theory. I need to think about it and think through this. But my take is that NATO probably will be not weakened, but it will be somehow split, maybe not formally, but informally split in different parts. For example, like in our case, in our region, that would be Nordic 8, Nordic countries plus Baltic countries. Iberian Peninsula, will form another probably region, and Central European NATO countries as well will put together. There still will be NATO, but there will be different parts because of also understanding how geopolitics works, because Nordic 8 will most likely pay a close attention to Russia and Ukraine, what's going on. Iberian Peninsula is probably not that interested in this case. And so I think this will work, but in a different form. Maybe it will turn out in a, let's say, a different equation at the end.
Chris. I follow you. I hear you.
Yeah, all right. So I will most definitely follow your articles. So keep writing. These are very full of insights and very deep thoughts. And I think everyone should go and read. So thank you very much, Pert, for your time, and have a nice weather in Italy.
Yeah, you too. Have a very good sharp shovel in your country.
Thanks.
Perhaps $1 billion question is now, what will this year bring to the global economy and how the world's going to change? That's a fair question with an uneasy answer. Well, we will look at the major media outlets such as The Economist and Financial Times, what they predict, but we will start with traditional sources, IMF, World Bank, and OECD. Global economic growth in 2026 is widely expected to remain positive but subdued, reflecting a world economy still navigating the aftermath of pandemic disruptions, geopolitical tensions, trade uncertainties, and slowing productivity growth. According to IMF, the world economy is forecast to expand by about 3.1% in 26, slightly above 3% in 25, with headline inflation gradually moderating toward more sustainable levels, projected to fall from around 4.2% last year to 3.6% in 26. So the World Bank also outlines a modest growth trajectory, projecting global GDP growth at around 2.7%, both 5 and 26, a pace that, while stable, is among the slowest in recent decades and highlights weaker progress in developing economies and the drag from trade tensions and policy uncertainty that dampen investment and job creation. Complementing these views, OECD forecasts global growth near 3 to 3.3% this year, with the OECD's baseline scenario pointing to continued resilience, but also cautioning that higher trade barriers, geopolitical fragmentation, and policy uncertainty are restraining global trade and business confidence, thereby limiting overall expansion. Across these major forecasts, the picture of 2026 is one of the modest but steady global growth, meaningful enough to avoid recessionary conditions, but not robust enough to significantly accelerate living standards or rapidly reduce systematic economic vulnerabilities. Inflation is generally expected to continue its gradual descent, though in many countries it will remain above central bank targets, underlining continuing challenges for policymakers balancing price stability with support for growth. Downside risks, including renewed trade conflicts, geopolitical shocks, tighter financial conditions, or sudden shifts in energy market, could further slow growth, while easing of trade barriers of successful structural reforms could enhance investment and long-term productivity. The Financial Times 2026 market outlook paints a cautiously optimistic picture. The U.S. economy remains strong with GDP growth, consumption profits, and business investment trending upward despite a soft labor market, while inflation gradually moderates. U.S. stocks are expensive and technically in a bubble, though a crash is unlikely this year, making diversification in cash and bonds sensible. AI euphoria is cooling as markets apply discipline to tech valuations, and cyclical sectors like materials, industrials, and financials may outperform defensives given ongoing fiscal stimulus and moderate rate cuts. The biggest risk remains inflation, which could derail the optimistic scenario if it rises sharply, while Federal Reserve policy is expected to keep rates near 3%, constrained by a solid economy and asset valuations. Overall, 26 favors continued growth, selective sector rotations, and careful risk management. The World Ahead 2026 special from The Economist paints the coming year as a time of uncertainty, stress tests, and transition across geopolitics, economics, technology, and society. Central to its outlook is the idea that established global norms, especially those shaped by major powers like the United States, like China and Russia, they will be challenged or reshaped, making 26 a critical barometer of deeper trends rather than a year defined by a single event. Geopolitically, analysts at the Economists highlight continuing geopolitical drift, with a debate over whether the world is entering a new Cold War-like era or forming fluid spheres of influence, but cautioning neither scenario is inevitable. Persistent conflicts in Ukraine, Sudan, and Middle East, gray zone provocations and tensions from the Arctic to cyberspace underline this fragile landscape. Rich countries living beyond their means and mounting fiscal stress raise the specter of bond market strains that could disrupt global financial stability. On the economic front, The Economist expects mediocre growth globally, risk from lingering inflation pressures, and questions over the sustainability of aggressive AI infrastructure investment, which may mask broader economic weakness and could lead to valuation resets. Technologically, let's say it's an optimistic outlook, especially around AI and healthcare innovations like new weight loss and gene therapies. They coexist with concerns about ethical issues, labor disruption, and data monopolies. Climate change remains an urgent background theme, while limiting warming to 1.5 Celsius is unlikely. Clean energy momentum in the global south offers glimmers of hope, even as northern countries lag. Cultural and societal shifts from sporting diplomacy at the FIFA World Cup to debates about pharmaceutical access also feature, underscoring how 2026 will intervene politics, economics, and human experience. Overall, The Economist frames 2026 not as a year of simple narratives, but as a complex crossroads where fiscal discipline, geopolitical alignment, technological transformation, and environmental realities converge to shape the path toward 2030. A lot of fuzz is about the US economy this year. It can go both ways, to be honest, and probably we can't really do any justified prediction with Donald Trump being the president of the United States. But, nevertheless, I have gathered some snippets from different forums, conferences, news bulletins, and economic outlooks, which talk about 2026 in the US economy from different perspectives. It's no secret that the US will hold very important midterm elections this year, and the economy will certainly be a major boost for people to show up in the election day to cast their vote. This is how NBC's senior business correspondent Christina Romans looks at this year.
2025 was the year that the cost of living was issue number one for American families, and I think that'll continue this year. And here's why. Over the past 5 years, you've seen electricity, car insurance, home value, all these things cost so much more today. So people are very price sensitive. Now, the good news is, at the end of the year, the Federal Reserve sort of penciling what it expects for the year ahead, and it sees the economy growing. It sees the jobless rate coming down a little bit and inflation getting under control. So I think anybody out there worried about your money for this year, you want to make sure you keep the high interest credit card debt under control, save where you can, think about investing, because we have the potential to be a good year if the Fed is right.
A lot of folks are also, in addition to affordability, a lot of folks are really concerned about artificial intelligence, AI, the AI boom that we saw in 2025. There are real concerns that people are going to start losing their jobs because of AI. How real are those concerns, or how real should they be?
Yeah, you saw that Time Magazine had the architects of AI as the people of the year last year. That's because this is life-changing, transformational technology. You can see the stock market soared to record highs on the back of investment in AI. We'll watch to see if there are those kind of stock market gains again this year. But there are concerns about what kinds of jobs it could replace. I would say for anybody who's a small business, lots of you out there are finding ways you can use AI to be more productive in your business, to outsource some marketing, to save some money. And if you work in an office, you have any other kind of job, you want to be using these tools to figure out how you're the most productive and how you can be the best at your job.
Before I let you go, Christine, there's something that I read recently that I found a bit surprising. Going back to affordability to a certain extent here, the average age of a home buyer in this country now, 40. The highest I think it's ever been?
First-time homebuyer, 40 years old.
What does that tell us?
Can you imagine? It tells us how difficult the housing market is. We know the Fed cut interest rates 3 times last year. Not clear that they're going to do it. Maybe they'll do another rate cut this year, which would help relieve pressure on those mortgage rates. But the mortgage market, the housing market has been very, very difficult. I would say if you want to buy a home, let's start making sure your credit score is perfect. Maybe not perfect, but as good as you can. Pay down your high-interest credit card debt. Start saving and stash that money in a high-yield savings account or higher-yielding short-term investments so you're ready when this market does turn and get a little bit more favorable.
Affordability, it's not the first time you heard this term, right? Especially if you read international business press. Well, it's becoming a big issue in the context of elections. Let's hear about the affordability by Michael Green, who is the strategist at Simplify Asset Management on Bloomberg, recorded 2 weeks ago.
So this affordability crisis, unfortunately, has become a global phenomenon that we are seeing rise in importance from a political framework. In the United States, it's absolutely become the critical issue, and this question of ACA subsidy expiries and the potential implications that has on cash flow, particularly to the working families in the United States, is really something that we're looking to politicians to take more seriously. If we don't, this is going to be an interesting 2026 with competing factors from the ACA subsidies and the potential for tariff stimulus. Certainly, my bias would be that the ACA subsidies end up being much more important.
That's interesting because, of course, health bills are a major source of bankruptcy in the United States. What will that mean for investors, though, if this pressure on consumers is not relieved?
Well, ultimately, it means that areas like consumer discretionary, which have received a rebound associated with things like the tariff stimulus discussions, the idea being that $2,000 checks are going to be going to low-income Americans who have an exceptionally high propensity to spend, that has been powering a bit of a rebound in the retail sector that had been heavily shorted and ignored up until very recently. Unfortunately, that suggests that if the ACA subsidies expire, that there's going to be a competing need for cash that's coming into those households. It would be a very narrow stimulus. Unfortunately, it would look an awful lot like what happened in early 2008 when the Bush administration sent out stimulus, only to find that it was largely used for debt repayment, which doesn't really stimulate the economy, or saved by higher income households.
Like all politicians, the current president, Donald Trump, tries to blame inflation and affordability on the previous administration. Do you think he'll have, what kind of president do, though, to reduce the cost of living or to slow the increase in the cost of living, Michael?
Unfortunately, this is one of the real challenges. The only way you address these problems that have emerged over decades, the concentration of American industry in terms of fewer and fewer providers who have gained pricing power relative to their customers, the gain in power from increasing monopolization and concentration is not something we're going to unwind, nor is the reindustrialization and the onshoring of supply. This is just not going to happen in a very short time period. Unfortunately, that doesn't lend itself well to short political time cycles. If I were advising President Trump, it would be to have an honest discussion with the American people about the steps that are being taken to mitigate this problem over time. And a disciplined application of that is really the only path to restoring his favorability ratings. That seems to be a real challenge, in particular that discipline component for this administration.
It's also worth to listen to the commentary of CNN's Michael Smerconi, who's saying that 2026 will be a start of yet another shift in the economy. A lot of inherited wealth will become available in the market as baby boomers will pass the torch to Gen Z. This is what he said 3 weeks ago.
Many Americans are worried about making ends meet, unsure that they'll be able to maintain their standard of living in retirement. And yet at the same time, a Wall Street Journal story this week said that 401k balances are creating a record number of new millionaires. Separately, UBS reports that the number of moderate millionaires, those with between $1 and $5 million, has surged in recent years. Fidelity alone now counts a record 654,000 individuals as 401k millionaires at their brokerage, while UBS says that households around the globe with between $1 and $5 million in assets have more than quadrupled since 2000 to over 50 million. In fact, UBS estimates that in the U.S., we added more than 1,000 new millionaires each day last year. And many of those newly minted millionaires will now be part of what's called the Great Wealth Transfer. Over the next 20 to 25 years, research from Cerulli Associates estimates that between 84 trillion and 124 trillion in U.S. wealth is going to move from baby boomers and older generations to their Gen X and millennial children, to their grandchildren, and to charity. To put that in perspective, the high end of that prediction, $124 trillion, that's more than 4 times the size of the entire U.S. economy. And nothing like this has ever happened before. According to Chase Horton, his projections at Cerulli, and he'll join me in a moment, boomers alone will pass down more than $53 trillion. About $72 trillion will go directly to heirs, nearly $12 trillion will flow to charity, and roughly 40% of all inheritance dollars will come from just 1.5% of American households. Millennials and Gen Xers, they'll be the big beneficiaries, but it's hardly equal. Some will inherit life-changing sums. Many will inherit modestly, and many won't inherit anything at all, widening existing inequalities. This massive wealth transfer is going to affect everything from housing markets to investment patterns. Younger Americans who inherit will be able to buy homes in places they previously couldn't afford. Older Americans may shift money out of riskier assets as they age, while younger heirs could invest differently. Think more tech, more ESG, more risk perhaps. And Washington is already eyeing the opportunity or the temptation to revisit estate taxes, capital gains rules at death, and charitable giving incentives. And then there are the political ramifications. In the 2020 election, voters under 45, mostly millennials, they backed Joe Biden over Donald Trump, while voters 45 and older, including most Gen Xers and boomers, favored Trump. In the 2024 election, exit polls showed a real shakeup. Gen Z backed Harris, but by only a few points, far tighter than the Democratic advantage in 2020. Support among millennials, that also narrowed significantly. But Trump opened up a double-digit lead among voters in their 50s and early 60s. That's according to the AARP's analysis of AP Votecast. So, what happens politically after the wealth shifts? Baby boomers, they accumulated more wealth than any generation in U.S. history thanks to post-war expansion, affordable housing, employer pensions, and decades of market growth. Gen Xers, now in their 40s and 50s, they tend to be more skeptical of government, more market-oriented. Many Xers will inherit meaningful wealth that fits those instincts. Millennials, they're the wild card. They came of age during 9/11, the Iraq War, the Great Recession, and then a housing market that feels like a locked door. Millennials have tended to lean more progressive than older generations, though that gap has narrowed in recent elections. They own fewer homes at their age than the boomers did. They carry more debt. They entered a much tougher labor market. Reflecting on all of this, in 2021, Eric Levitz wrote a piece for New York Magazine titled, "Will the Great Wealth Transfer Spark a Millennial Civil War?" And he argued that the biggest political divide of the future won't be between boomers and millennials, but within millennials themselves. Scholarly research suggests the political effect of this great wealth transfer, that it won't be one-dimensional. Some heirs become more conservative because they now have more to protect. Some become more progressive because financial security frees them to focus on different life priorities. And the largest group, those who inherit little or nothing at all, they may become more frustrated.
We all wonder what will happen with the Fed this year, and maybe more importantly with the rates and inflation. Let's see a piece from an interview with JP Morgan's asset management chief global strategist David Kelly on Fox Business. This was recorded 3 weeks ago.
The majority of the members of the committee still expect just one rate cut next year. So I'd say it's dovish in the short run, kind of hawkish longer term.
And you're also calling attention to another bout of stimulus we can expect in the spring in the form of tax refunds.
Yes, I don't think enough people paid attention to this, but when they passed this big tax bill in the middle of the summer, they made a lot of the new tax cuts, in fact, all of the new tax cuts, retroactive to January 1st, 2025. But they didn't change the income tax withholding schedules. And that means that when people start doing their taxes early in the new year, they're going to find that they're owed a big refund. We think the average refund is going to go from $3,200 this year up to $4,000 next year. So that's like an $800 stimulus check. And most of that will be paid out before the end of March. So we think the economy is going to get this little surge of consumer stimulus here that's going to push up consumer spending. And, you know, along with the AI boom and a good stock market for this year, I think all that will keep consumer spending and the economy pretty hot in the first half of next year.
Does hot mean inflation? And what does that mean for the first half of the year? And will that cool down by the end?
Yes, I think it does. And I think it's not just that this growth would cause inflation. It's that I think the retailers are trying to find a way to pass on these tariff increases to consumers. You know, the Walmarts and the Home Depots of the world, they've already paid the tariffs and they're paying the tariffs as they import this stuff. They've been reluctant to fully pass them on to consumers. But if consumers have got pockets which are full of tax refunds, you know, that's a perfect opportunity to push up these prices. And because of that, we really don't think that inflation will peak out until perhaps June of next year, somewhere between 3.5% and 4%. And after that, if there's no further stimulus, if we don't get some tariff rebates or something, I do think inflation will come back down to 2% at the end of the year. But I think we've got higher inflation before we see it cool down.
Well, 2% at the end of the year would be great for the Fed, right? That is their target. Would that be good news, I think?
Well, yes, it would be, but I do think that we need to get there first. And okay. I think they are very suspicious that Washington will find some other way of stimulating the economy and stimulating inflation before the end of next year. But overall, we do think that without more stimulus, the economy is going to have an okay year next year, but the first half is going to be stronger than the second. And as we go into 2027, it's going to be a pretty sluggish economy. We're not thinking recession, but pretty sluggish.
And we will finish up with an interesting perspective from the same JP Morgan, this time CEO Jamie Dimon, about the AI and how it can take the US economy by surprise. This was recorded from Fox Business a month ago.
I don't think AI is going to dramatically reduce jobs like unbelievably next year. I think AI is real. We've been doing it since 2012. We have 2,000 people doing it, 500 use cases. We have large language models inside the company that we're using in our own documents, our own processing and stuff like that. We use it for risk, fraud, marketing, design, note-taking, idea generation, error management. Agents are coming. And for the most part, AI is going to do great stuff for mankind, like tractors did, like fertilizers did, like vaccines did. It'll save lives. We'll be working... maybe one day we'll be working less hard, but having wonderful lives. So it'll cure a lot of cancers. It'll have composite materials. Now, of course, it needs to be properly regulated. There are downsides to AI, just like there are to airplanes, pharmaceuticals, cars. All things get used by bad people. So assuming that the government figured out some way to put guardrails around AI, but it will eliminate jobs. That doesn't mean that people won't have other jobs. My advice to people would be, critical thinking. Learn skills, learn your EQ, learn how to be good at a meeting, how to communicate, how to write. You'll have plenty of jobs. And if it does happen too fast for society, which is possible, we can't assimilate all those people that quickly. Like if you look at, what happened on farms and the internet and electricity, it took a while. This may be a little bit longer, and it'll be a little harder to assimilate people. If we can't, we, government, we government and we the companies, society should look at how do we phase it in a way that we don't damage a lot of people. Like we should have done a little bit more on trade assistance years ago when you had a town that got damaged by the closure of a plant. And that you can do. You can, retrain people, relocate people, income assistance, early retirement. And the next job may be a better job, but they have to learn how to do the job. And as you know, skills are, you can earn quite a bit of money with skills. And so, and then companies like us, we've been doing this a long time. We have what we call redeployment programs. We lose people because we close down. We go in, we look at a process. We go from 1,000 people to 400 people in a process. And almost always the 600 people get offered other jobs. They've got skills we like. They want to go. They could go and try other things. So I'm not afraid of it. We just maybe you're right. We should get ahead of it and maybe have some programs in place that can handle this if it starts happening too fast. I also don't think you're going to see it all happen this year. It isn't going to be like it's this year. Like if you look at this year, you have a huge amount of construction that needs to take place. And to do that construction, you need roads and trucks and drivers. You need servers, you need fiber, you need all that. So it's going to cause probably more jobs in the short run in total.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the fact that we're going to need more electricians and plumbers and, like you said, those trade schools. But, Jamie, I guess what I'm asking is, are we going to see any return on investment on all this money anytime soon? I mean, Jensen Huang told me that we're talking about trillions of dollars every year going into the build-out of data centers. I mean, look at all these data centers that we have actually seen built in America. I mean, at this point, we've got about 5,000 data centers that have built for AI. When you add up all this money, all this trillions of dollars, where's the return on investment, Jamie? And when are we going to see it?
Yeah. So I think I heard, I haven't read it yet, but I heard we did a research report about how much. It's $5 trillion, and that includes everything: the data centers, the servers, the chips, the fiber. It doesn't necessarily include the power plant or the transmission lines. And then we were going through today, like where's the money going to come from? Public, private credit, specialized type of finance, asset-backed securities. And there's another report that does talk about, what's the income that has to be paid to those units to make it worthwhile. So I look back at the internet a little bit. A lot went into it. There was a lot of success. A lot of people didn't make it. It turned out differently than people thought when it started. And I think you probably get some of that here. There will be big winners. You remember out of the internet, you got Google and Facebook and Amazon and tons of others and whole new technologies. But it took a while for some other things to come in, like the iPhone or something. So here, it will eventually pay off. Who pays off, who the winners are, who the losers are, which models win, which new chips. I'm not talking about the chips today, but the chips in 5 years. We don't know how it's all going to play out. But AI itself is real. It gets, you actually look at the price of AI almost by the minute now, because you can actually buy a chip on time, like by the hour if you have to. So we'll see. We'll try to see how it plays out, but I think in total it will pay for itself.
Share your insight, how the world economy will turn out in 2026, and most importantly, how it will affect our Baltic markets, living standards, security, and so on. I want to thank you for your response on the roundtable of Baltic economists. Those who missed this segment, you are all welcome to scroll up a bit in your YouTube or Spotify feed and find it there. We are ready to surprise you with interesting interviews, conversations, and commentary this year, and I promise that the season of MedianReport is becoming stronger and stronger by days. I'll be back in 2 weeks, when again we will talk.
Don't forget to subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, join Median Premium Package for only $2.99 a month for exclusive content and full-length interviews. Find us also on Spotify and all the best podcasting platforms. Thank you for comments, shares, and likes. We appreciate them a lot.